One of the many things I love about our great state is the shoreline. We have about 95 miles of coastline on Long Island Sound, but it is in danger because of the climate change and the environment. And that will be a topic at the state capitol this session. And joining me now is the man known as the Long Island Soundkeeper, Bill Lucey from Save the Sound. And Mr. Lucey, good to see you here on the program.
Yeah, you too, Dennis.
So give me a little senses to your background and of the organization Save the Sound.
So I grew up in Connecticut, but I went on a long walkabout, and I'm a fisheries biologist, so I went to Central America, up to Alaska, over to Hawaii, and finally made it back here to go out on a boat and patrol Long Island Sound for Save the Sound. We're a regional environmental organization that works both in New York and Connecticut.
How old is Save the Sound?
Save the Sound is 50 years old.
Okay.
So it combined with Connecticut Fund for the Environment and the old Soundkeeper program. So all three organizations came together.
Let's talk a little bit about the status of the Sound right now, because back in the 1990s it was viewed as polluted, but over time it has gotten cleaner, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten cleaner since that time.
And how did it get polluted?
Well, if you think back, we cut down all the trees, we had pastures everywhere, we started with a few thousand people, now there's probably close to 50 million people living, within a greater watershed, and we all have lawns and fertilizers, and we all put stuff in the water.
And what's the status of the Sound now?
So,
would you describe it as clean?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's clean yet. It's got a lot of work to go, but in the last 15 years, there was what's called the Long Island Sound Nitrogen Action Plan, which really started to clean up the sewage treatment plants, and we reduced the nitrogen from those 60% in the last 15 years. So it's getting better.
How is climate change impacting the Sound? Because I was in East Haven, excuse me, walking around with a woman who lives there, and she was showing me that there were some steps when she was a kid that used to get out of the beach, and now they're underwater all the time.
Yeah, we are going to see some big sea level rise in Long Island Sound, and we're going to see greater storm surge. And as things get warmer, it also increases the pollution. So you can make gains forward, but as it gets warmer, it starts setting you back a little bit.
So what is the future of the Sound if the water keeps rising? I noticed some of the newer homes tend to be on stilts, for lack of a better word, columns, pillars.
Yeah, there's a big effort right now to create resilient shorelines, and that's going to include retreating from certain areas. It's going to include building living shorelines, building oyster reefs. One project I work with is eelgrass meadows, getting those reestablished. They attenuate the wave action. So if we rebuild the resiliency and the health of Long Island Sound, it'll adapt to that sea level rise.
You're trying to get some work done at the Capitol from lawmakers. What are you asking them for this session?
Yeah, so I work on fisheries and water policy issues mainly. One of the big ones is PFAS legislation, the forever chemical they call it.
So PFAS is a chemical that's used to put out fires?
It's in firefighting foam, it's in nonstick pans, it's in dental floss, it's in cosmetics, textiles, couches, all kinds of stuff.
And it's ending up in the Sound?
Yeah.
How?
So what happens is we have all these products in our home, we ingest them, there are lots of different plastics, we breathe in the dust from our carpets, and then we send stuff to the sewage treatment plant, either through our laundry or our toilets, and it gets concentrated there, and that gets put out into the rivers, which ultimately end up in Long Island Sound.
You paint a dire and dangerous picture. So what do you want lawmakers to do?
So what we're trying to do, and this is a multi-state effort, is we're trying to get them to say, if you have textiles, if you have cosmetics, and you don't need to add this PFAS, just don't do it. Just ban PFAS from all these categories. And we're also working in New York to have the same language. Massachusetts has a similar bill because there's been a number of lawsuits. And there's been drinking water wells that have been contaminated in my town in Killingworth. There's been trout were contaminated in a couple of rivers that they had to shut down the fishing in Connecticut in the last couple of years. So we need to just stop throwing the stuff out there.
What's the early reaction from lawmakers you've spoken with about this?
Really pretty good. It's not a partisan issue that I can tell. We've been working on it for 4 or 5 years, but now it's gotten to the point where people are more educated about the dangers of it. It causes a number of health problems. So we've been talking with both sides of the aisle, and we've been getting some very positive reactions.
Let's talk about the fishing industry in Long Island Sound. As people go to restaurants and they might order oysters or they might order some seafood, what kind of things that come from the Sound end up on your table?
Well, oysters is the big one.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the early testing on that has shown they're clean. PFAS is not a large pollutant. Conch is another one. That's a big fishery people may not know about. Yeah, the whelk, those big giant
You think
snails.
about that come from Bermuda or the Bahamas or something, but they're from the Sound.
It's a very viable fishery for the fishermen who've hung on. I used to do a little bit of lobster fishing over out at Long Island, and back in the 90s, we were catching 600, 700, 800 pounds of lobsters a day. Now you're lucky to get 6 or 8 lobsters a day. So this industry that was heritage really for Long Island Sound for many years kind of died back, and the ones that are left are really holding strong.
Is it overfishing or environmental factors?
No, it's basically a couple of things. One, it's the pesticides that get into the water. So we have another bill, neonicotide bans, and what that does, it kills bugs when it gets into the streams, including baby lobsters potentially, and we know it kills shrimp. And also it's getting hot. So once the water gets too hot, it stresses out the lobsters and their immune systems don't work as well.
And so where are these products coming from, these chemicals?
The neonicotinoids are, they're used in pre-emergent control of weeds and insects. That they use them in nurseries, on golf courses, and agriculture. And we really don't want that stuff getting into the water either.
And so what's the reaction to that, Ben, to ban that? Because that's... a lot of people are using these pesticides.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're going to stay away from the agricultural use of it, the food production. But if you're doing it for ornamentals or aesthetics, it's really not necessary at this point. So we want to cut it down so there's not as much going in. And if you're close to Long Island Sound, it's probably not going to be a farm, given the price of your real estate in that area. It's going to be a golf course or something like that.
Yeah, those numbers in decline of lobster, that's pretty stunning when you think about it.
Yeah.
You said only 6 to 8 a day.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how many. They'll come through in waves.
Sure.
And they have size restrictions now, and there's a lot of management decisions that need to be made. There's just not a lot of fishermen left. And unfortunately, sometimes people think the fishermen are, they're out there doing damage. They're really not. They're the ones that really are seeing what's going on the ground every day. They have the pulse of what's happening with the fishery and the Sound.
Bill Lucey from Save the Sound. Best of luck, sir.
Yeah.
We learned a lot today.
All right, thank you.
Hartford Economy and a new fascinating course at UConn when we come back.